Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 85 in the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. For those who attend on a regular basis, you notice I didn't glance to my left. I did cheat and I looked earlier. Cool topic today, one that we've been talking about for a while, and that's where we're going to find the next generation. And I looking at a few of the names in the list, I see some of them in there. So, it's one of those challenges. To talk about that, I've got a good friend, a customer, an associate, a compadre, cohort, pick your adjective. Geary Morrill from Alpha Media. Gary's also the, if I get this wrong, Geary, correct me, chair of the SBE Education Committee?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yay. So thanks for being here, and I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Glad to be along.
Now, for the background for other folks, usually we try to coordinate our guests a little bit in advance, and I've been on the road and fighting with technology. I'm just going to put it prim and proper like that. Anybody that follows me on Facebook's got to see all the dirty news. But I reached out to Geary yesterday afternoon and said, help, I need help. And Gary's like, yeah, I can. And so definitely extra appreciation for that. Thank you again.
Not a problem.
All right, so we'll do the mandatory housekeeping stuff first. All right, we try to make these as interactive as possible. Got a fairly small group tonight, today, only 30 or 40, and that's cool. So if you've got any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, sarcasm, snark, if I don't answer it, I'll be grading it in the background. But type it into the little enter a question for staff box in your control panel, hit the send button, it'll pop up on my screen, and if I don't see it, it'll prompt me in the background. Another thanks to Mr. Disembodied Voice, Ed Sylvester, in the background, who makes all this stuff work. Caught him by surprise, too. He didn't have a chance to unmute his microphone and say anything.
I just chose not
to. Yeah, there he is. One other thing, if you've got a mic and you're not shy, then you can hit the little hand wavy icon on your control panel and I can unmute you and make you part of the conversation. And we're talking about a bunch of things today. And mandatory shout out to the SBE too. Megan gave us the approval to include half a certification under category I for any Nautel webinar that you attend. So whatever you scroll your recertification count on, notepad, iPad, whatever you choose, make sure that you jot that down. All right. Geary, I was just telling, well, I've been telling folks all year, it's like, I got to get my certification renewed. I got to get my certification renewed. Now for the last 6 months, it's like, I got my certification renewed. But, that'll get old after a couple of months and I'll find something else to talk about. All right. So the big challenge, anybody who's an SBE member will know this. Anybody who isn't will know it too. When you walk into a facility and get talking to the engineers, more and more we're seeing a lot. It's like I said, if I go to an SBE meeting, it's not uncommon for me to be the youngest guy in the room, and I'm on the wrong side of 50 by a whole bunch and pushing 60 harder than I'd like to admit. So that is, there, Steve wants to know in the questions, Geary, when will the new pre-cert materials be available? Do you know the answer to that? I mean, that's a different committee, but.
For which cert?
Oh, okay, so they're all in different stages?
Yeah, I mean, they are working on a new platform that will be web-based instead of the stuff that we deliver now, so that there's an app on your device, and that is still being worked out. It's amazing we're a bunch of engineers. We're very technically oriented, but some of this stuff, when you're developing websites and you're developing web programs, yeah, it's educational. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, well, and the challenge is that, and this is one of the things that I'll mention in a bit, but RF engineering versus computer engineering versus web page design, those are three highly different skill sets.
Yeah.
And I mean, web page design is one of those things. It's funny because we usually bring the marketing folks in to do that because they tend to do a better job than the engineers, where we want to stuff all the stuff into the 5-pound bucket, 5-gallon bucket rather.
Yep. And you know, this whole thing with the new cert preview and stuff, I'm one of the folks that actually asked for it because I'd like to be able to use it. There's a benefit to be able to use that to get a little bit ahead of ourselves here. There's a benefit to that interactively with mentors and mentees.
Well, and it's nice. I know that was one of the last things Terry Bond did was work. He worked his butt off to get a lot of the cert preview questions updated. And
yes.
I mean, that was, so it's only been a couple of 3 years that you could look at cert preview and not see questions on, you know, what's the speed of a 1-inch tape traveling at 4 FPS. Well, obviously that is the speed, but yeah, you know, I mean, that just tape questions finally went away. So that
yes.
was cool too.
Yeah, well, the industry changed a lot and it's accelerating faster. So trying to stay ahead of that tsunami is a challenge.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those, because like I'm looking at the attendance list and I see Corey, who is, I think, on the younger edge of the spectrum. I see a couple of folks like Ryder here is, you know, I'm going to say my age group, but those of us who are a little more chronologically challenged, if you will. So it's cool that we've got a widespread interest in our own little audience here. And the reason I bring that up is because we get the advanced questions. And for one of them, Curtis, who is another longtime attendee, had asked, you know, what's the spread of the average T3 attendant? And I'm guessing that by T3 he meant TTT. Oh, and John's in the comments has said, "Will you still need me? Will you still feed me because I'm 64?" Which I'm not 100% sure that's exactly how the lyrics went to that, but it's pretty close. Yeah, and same deal. I mean, we're none of us getting any younger, and this is becoming a big challenge. One of the other things that, and this is something that I think we really need to fix. You see a lot of ads that say needs a BSc in electronics or electrical engineering. And be brutally honest, so again, I was last week I was in Wisconsin. I was they were doing the Media Technology Institute, which and another kudo for Terry Bond. He started that 11 years ago, and Bill Hubbard's been carrying it on. And I get dragged in to help out here and there, but yeah, yeah. See, Curtis said T3 equals TTT. That's how he shorthands it in the calendar. Good call. Anyway, so Terry started the MTI, and I had the pleasure of being there for that last week. And one of the questions I asked during one of the sessions on education was, you know, how many people had like formal electronics training, like an associate engineering degree or a BSc? And let's just say that the number of hands that went up were the minority, less than half by far. I think it was like 4 or 5 out of 20 odd people in the room at a guess. And, you know, I mean, most of us in this job have learned to do it by doing it and not dying in the process. That's the way I like to word it. But hey, it's not wrong when you get to transmitters. What about you, Gary? You got formal training or just stumbled in?
I've got the equivalent of an associate's degree, and it's because back when I was, you know, I started out in programming. And at one point in time, our director of engineering, a guy that I've mentioned to you before, my director of engineering for the group I was with was a guy by the name of Steve Church. Yeah, that's Steve Church. And we had an opening come up because the engineer was going to go back into his family's heating and air conditioning business. And so they were looking for somebody. And I had always been one of the guys that was always helping Steve and, you know, hands-on when we needed an extra pair of hands and stuff. And he had said to his boss, he says, rather than go out and try to find somebody that fits our culture, that's got the background, how about we take somebody that we know fits our culture, that has an aptitude, and train him up? So my employer paid for me to go to night school for 2 years, but it was a school. The name of the school was RETS, Radio and Electronics Training School, I think it was. I was sitting beside guys that were training to be two-way techs and stuff. And so it was all hands-on. And I mean, we built stuff.
Right.
And that was the training. And he told me right in, he says, when you come out of that, you pass your first, you're our guy. So, but that was a different day, because today when you go to talk to universities and stuff, the very first thing they ask us is, okay, how many jobs are you going to have over the next decade?
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's not a number that's probably going to get them all excited and jumping up and down.
No. And by the same token, especially for what we do, I mean, I am fairly certain that Bates Technical out in Oregon still offers a broadcast engineering class. I
Yeah.
know several schools, including University of Indianapolis. Shout out to Scott Euchre for some info on that, and several other smaller ones. Well, St. Cloud State in Minnesota. There are a lot of them that have broadcast media programs that run a station, whether radio or TV, and do a lot of engineering training as part, even if not part of a formal curriculum. But yeah, there are not a lot of broadcast engineering courses out there. In Canada, SAIT, Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, shut down their broadcast engineering program not too long ago. So, this is the kind of job that you learn to do by doing, and like I say, do by doing and not dying. And it's, as we age out, that's becoming, so I see the challenge as twofold, and I won't use the word problem because I don't think it's a problem. It's just, like you said earlier, it's a paradigm shift. The way we do it can't be the way we've always done it.
That's
Because, it's not the shiny new thing, and kids aren't just like falling all over themselves to wander into radio stations and meet the engineer. So, and so here's an example of how long I've been concerned about this. I mean, this is what I was doing 21 years or 11 years ago,
right.
Coincidentally at the same Media Training Institute during their engineering day. So it's a bigger situation. And I mean, John Perret in 2011 talked about how we're getting older and not getting any younger as a group. And, that's so how do you guys work with it at Alpha? Because, I mean, obviously the size of the group will make a difference, whether you go outside to contract, whether you have in-house, whether you do regional engineers with contract for the regions.
And the Alpha is kind of unusual in the fact that we're not one of these organizations that goes lockstep and everything comes down from on high. We really value the individual market managers and the individual management teams, and so we try to support them as best they can. It's like I tell my guys, I'm not your boss, but I'm going to support you. So let me do what I can to help you there, and it depends on the situation. One great example was in the Chicagoland area. We had a need for a couple folks, and so we started looking around, and we just weren't getting the responses because, like I said, there's not a lot of people out there that aren't gainfully employed that are wanting to jump into the industry, and at a level of a market like Chicago, even less so. I mean, nobody's expecting that to be their first gig. So we developed from within. I had found a chap that was with one of our clusters there in the Chicagoland area that was actually on the street team for promotions and stuff, but he had the technical aptitude. He was one of these guys that had a soldering, station on his desk. Because if somebody came back in with bad cables and stuff, he'd go through them, test them, and had a meter the whole 9 yards. And so he was interested in that. And then we had another guy that, lo and behold, we discovered, well, he's got an amateur extra license. I guess he might know a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Those are the two guys. Those are the two guys that we brought on board. And I worked with them in a mentorship position.
And that's one of the things I told somebody once. I said, I can teach anybody electronics. I can't teach you enthusiasm.
Yeah. And you got to have an aptitude for it.
Yeah. And Shane in the comments has made a note about Mark Persons, and Mark Persons arguably has mentored, probably, I would guess directly and indirectly more of us than a lot of folks, because, you know, he writes a lot of articles and just contributes to education all over. Shane mentioned a specific comment, and I'm just going to leave that unquoted, Shane, and you'll see why in a couple of slides. But so I was talking about this MTI, and if you look at the MTI, that's our class. And this was kind of a cool shift because our average age was under 40 years. And I see a couple of people from this picture in the attendee list in front of me, so I'm not going to call them out by name unless they hit the hand raising icon. But that was kind of cool. And like I said, that's just one example. So Wisconsin has really been taking it seriously. I know Alabama's got the Alabama Broadcasters Academy that the association is putting on. Michigan's been doing more stuff where you're based, and you know, I've had the pleasure of at least spending a little bit of time attending some of the engineering committee meetings for that when I think to show up. So Geary, be the first to tell you I'm on the education committee for the SBE2, and on, you know, when I think to show up is probably the best way to put it. But he's going to yell at me someday for that. But
Nah.
if you look at this picture, there's something else I'm seeing, and this comes back to something I kind of alluded to with the where do you get your engineers from. A lot of the young folks, I'm seeing a lot of contract engineering groups springing up rather than like one or two individual guys or girls. It's like an actual team. So like Inrush Broadcasting is well represented in this picture. There's DNAV was doing some of the instructing. Out in Michigan, you got Summit Technologies, Paul and the crew. Down south, you got Josh Bone and the Max Connect group. You know, so let's see, who am I missing? Peter from Allen, Public Media Engineering, that team. I think I got the ones that I'm really familiar with. By all means, I have a you know, I have a little Rolodex of these, so if you know anybody else that I'm missing that you think is good, shoot me an email and I'll absolutely include them to my list. Curtis is asking why it looks like nobody wanted to stand around, and yeah, I think this was a forced PR picture. It's like, hey, everybody get together. I don't think anybody expected to be slapped up on a slide in one of Jeff's slide decks. So we'll
Jeff, actually, there's more to it than that, because I try to explain to people who is attracted to our industry, and I said, you know, one of the funny things about engineering, and now this is not 100% true always, but I said usually people gravitate towards the technical side of our businesses because they like things more than they like people.
Yep.
Okay?
It's
a natural thing.
Yeah.
How do people gravitate into sales in our business? They like money more than people. They like people, but they like money more.
Ouch. Hey, sales guy here, be nice.
Hey, but I'm just saying, you know, I mean, people tend to gravitate where their interests lie.
Well, and the funny thing is, so Bill Hubbard, who was running the MTI, made the joke that we've all heard, you know, how do you tell an extroverted engineer? He's the guy staring at your shoes.
Exactly.
But the funny thing is, and that's what I'm finding, like in this group with the younger folks, they are the ones who grew up in the era of Facebook, Instagram, and social media. So they do tend to be a lot more socialized than us older people who were the ones sitting in the corner with the soldering iron and the scowl. You know, the social defense mechanisms. Anyway, the reason I've got this slide up, this is something interesting that Wisconsin has been doing. And I know I'm beating the drum on Wisconsin, partly because, well, it's in my territory. I've got ties there. And it's one of those states that I've really been impressed with some of the things they're doing. But one of the things they are doing is part of the youth apprenticeship with the State Department of Workforce Development. So every state, 49 out of 50 states, I forget who doesn't, but one state I couldn't find contact for, but every other state has a Department of Workforce Development. And those DWDs typically have an apprenticeship program, a youth apprenticeship for kids to go out and get hands-on time with different careers, see what they like. You know, they get paid somewhat, the state subsidizes it, and so it's not like an unpaid internship by any stretch, but it gives them a chance to get out and learn stuff. It gives you a good chance to see if they've got an aptitude. So, you know, maybe that's the situation, and that's one of those things, like with Wisconsin, I think you really need to get the State Broadcast Association involved to make it happen. And I know Geary, no secret that I've been pushing the SBE along the same path a little bit. So
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah, and
there's a lot we can do, and I think we need to do a little more.
absolutely. And there's a lot of times where, the state associations need to get involved, because I've seen this happen in more than one situation where some of the broadcasters will say to the state association, well, why don't you guys just become a clearinghouse and you can hire a couple contractors and then we'll all pay you for it. Now, these are in some of the smallest state broadcast associations I know of that have like a director and maybe a gal that answers the phone. And I'm going, oh, and now you're going to try to coordinate engineers for people. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. There are, of course, when you got 50 states and 50 organizations, you got 50 ideas on how best to solve it, and actually as many as you've got directors and people with input. Curtis mentions that one of the reasons engineers get into engineering is because if your coworker won't work, you can't do anything about it. I'll add the side note that you can, but usually HR gets involved. But if a part doesn't work, you can fix it, replace it, or beat it with a hammer. And again, this is the part where HR gets involved when you're doing that with people. But yeah, it's that, as you said earlier, I mean, with engineering, typically we solve problems. If something's busted, we can fix it. If we can't fix it, we can replace it. All kinds of options. With other jobs, it's a little different. So those are the kind of kids we need to reach. And I'm going to say it out loud. We're not doing it at $39,000 a year, which is, depending on where you are, a step above minimum wage in a lot of places, but it's a small step.
Aren't there folks that are flipping burgers that are getting close to that 39K these days?
Again, like I said, a step, I mean, over here, minimum wage would put you at, let's see, last time I checked, about 28.5 a year.
Yeah.
So, that's for a skilled job. That's pretty low. I did
and they
see
don't carry
one.
They don't have to give them their cell phone number and be on call or anything.
24/7. Funny thing about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw one not long ago, 50 grand for 7-station cluster for a sole engineer, the only one. So yep, 24/7 on call, covering several hundred miles. Some of them provide company vehicles. So I think that's part of it. Yeah. So Shane mentions, Shane, I'm going to unmute you and bring you into this conversation now. Boy, he's going to regret typing pretty soon. So you can unmute yourself,
Are you
Shane.
sure you want to unmute me?
Well, and I know you're passionate about this too, so it's cool to have you here. But you mentioned,
oh, good.
Yeah, you're good. You mentioned that you didn't leave the door for less than $80 an hour when you were contracting, and that was with clients that you actually liked.
It's true. It's true. I did charge a hassle factor in my rates. You almost have to. That's really a key, though, is finding good clients when you're a contractor. And I'm sure any of the guys out there who are contracting now will tell you the same thing.
Yep. Well, and it's, to be honest, it's not just them. I mean, if you work in sales for any length of time, there's a different discount level for the people that and I'll quantify a little bit. I mean, I'm not talking like $10, $20, $30,000, but if you're pissing me off and I know I'm going to have to work 5 times as hard to do this job, then yeah, the rate's going to go up a hair, or the discount's going to go down. The same bottom line either way. Steve mentions that minimum wage in Connecticut's $15 an hour, or $31,200 a year. So again, we're not too far off the bottom end, and that's one of the things that we do need to address. I had somebody ask me what it would take for me to go work for them doing another like 5-6 station cluster, 2 markets, and I gave them a number, and they audibly gasped. And it's like, I've got some feeling of what I think I'm worth these days. And maybe it's inflated in my mind, but but it is, yeah. So absolutely, that's something we've got to address too. The other thing that we run into, and this is, you were mentioning mentor earlier, Geary. So when you were working with Steve, and So I put the slide up on the term Elmer just because that's what you call a mentor. But that's another challenge when you've got stations that don't have a full-time station engineer. How do you find mentors?
Yep.
So what do you guys do?
Well, within, when we started doing this, obviously, I was, volunteering my own services, okay, for the guys that I was talking about earlier, and we put that program together. The resources that we use are what today within the SBE we call technical professional training, right. and all of those elements existed, but nobody understood that they were all together, and they really didn't understand that we needed to market it. That was our bigger challenge. But so now we're actively out recruiting for guys, and quite frankly, I'll lay a little bit of a guilt trip on them, because if you are somebody that's been around as long as I have, I had somebody back in the day. I explained to them, and I say, I remember when I first started, there were 8 guys on the engineering team at an AM/FM that I was at. So if you were the new guy, you had somebody that was going to bring you along, that was going to be your Elmer, if you will. And so, where is that now? So I just remind these guys, hey, it's time to pay it forward.
Right.
So
now the cool thing is, and I'm going to shout out to the SBE a lot, and I'll be perfectly honest, full disclosure, there's a hidden reason here. You'll find out in the next little while that there's a bunch of people running for board positions, and I may or may not be on that list. So, like I said, interest of full disclosure, you did hear it here first. But one of the things that is cool, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, is there are a vast amount of online resources that just didn't exist when we were younger. Now, the challenge with online resources is if you ask a question, you'll get 85 answers, and of those 85 answers, 80 of them may or may not know exactly what they're talking about. So you do have to filter pretty carefully sometimes. You mentioned the TPT, and so I did happen to have a slide about that, which was conveniently located. And one of the other things I do want to shout out is the mentor program. And the mentor program, see, I've avoided it in the past, because I'll tell you right off, when it comes to getting little RF turned into big RF or converting AC to RF, I can talk about that reasonably smart as long as we don't get into hollow state technology and glass FETs. If you're talking solid state gear, yeah, I can figure that stuff out. So I've got a pretty narrow window of stuff that I'm good at. So I avoided mentor because I don't know anything about what happens on the studio side of the STL. You get on the other end, I'm pretty good. So one of the things that the mentor program has added that a lot of people don't know about is the subject matter expert category. Now, I know you're not really on the mentorship committee, but you've been intimately involved with this, as have I. So what is that?
Well, let's start from this point. If you're going to agree to mentor somebody, you're going to be their primary source of contact, okay? And so you're going to stay in touch with that person on a pretty regular basis. Ideally, if you could be in the same organization they're in, you might be able to give them more opportunities. But even if you're not, it's staying in touch with them and kind of helping to guide them along in their learning process. Somebody there to kind of show them the way. But then nobody knows everything, okay?
Right.
And so let's go back to all of us are smarter than any of us. That's where the subject matter expert comes in, because let's say that you don't know a dang thing about AM directionals, but all of a sudden your mentee is saying to you, well, yeah, we're going to be dealing with this, and they're asking me to help in this, and I have no idea what it is. Well, now you can go down a list of folks that have they're agreeing to be a resource. They're not agreeing to take somebody on under their wing on a regular, every couple of weeks basis. But if you've got a challenge and some knowledge that you need, yeah, get a hold of me. And that goes out to our mentors only. So there's still the contact point in that relationship to be able to bring those resources to bear. But that's where that came from.
Right. And I think that's a really cool idea. And I mean, because going back for forever, we've all had the Rolodex of who do you call when you got a question about this, or that, or the other thing. I know I get a lot of calls about like grounding or ferrites. I don't know why. Um, Funny, I haven't gotten a lot of calls about iPhones recently.
Just comments.
Yep, that's it. So that is one of the cool things. And this has kind of all come to like I showed the picture of Wisconsin earlier and the younger folks, and it's all come down to, again, a paradigm shift where the folks coming into this tend to be IT oriented. And so we're dealing with training that is geared for people that don't necessarily have the RF and the big watts training. And on that note, you put together this Ennis Workshop at the NAB this year.
Yeah, with some help, Jeff. It was put together, but we really started out from the standpoint of, how do you help people get those RF legs under themselves? And if you've never even dealt with something as simple as Ohm's law, I mean, you got to start someplace. And that's exactly where we started. I mean, and we put together a 2-day program that if the people would have had to pay a reasonable rate to get the knowledge of the people to put that on, it would have been expensive as all get out. But we made it attractive. And some of the folks said, gee, I don't know. I mean, there was a whole lot of stuff covered. And the idea was, we're going to expose you to these ideas and these concepts, and then we're going to try to help you do some self-learning, okay? Yep. The idea is I can't wave a wand and make you an RF engineer, but I can make you aware of what it is and at least get you to the second stage. The first stage is you don't know what you don't know. The second stage is you don't know. Now we can get learning taking place. And that's what we were.
One of the things you did with the MTI, same deal, was it's one of the things I told them, and we put up the Ohm's Law wheel and did the same thing. Actually, Greg Buchwald taught the Ohm's Law session at the RF 101 from Motorola fame, and Greg's brilliant, and he's an amazing teacher. So, yes. I may or may not have shamelessly, at least unconsciously while talking about it, plagiarized a lot of his mannerisms. And yeah, the goal isn't to teach you what you don't know, it's to teach you to understand what you don't know so you can go look it up yourself.
Yep.
And so that was kind of cool that way. And this is one of the things that you're going to see, I hope, expanding more and more with different state organizations and with the SBE. So, again, I know the ABA has been doing more in this regard in Alabama. I've talked to folks, Wisconsin, obviously, Michigan, a whole bunch of other places. So definitely, again, that's one of those, if there's something that I can help with, give me a shout out. And if I don't know the answer, I'll usually know who does. Yep. Right. Other thing, and this is something that as a regional director and a people manager, as well as the guy that fixes stuff on occasion, you get to fix stuff near as much as you used to be able to.
Not firsthand.
A lot more meetings and a lot more delegation, understood. But so this was a book that, go figure, I searched Speaking Millennial for Dummies, and there is actually a book. But the communication styles have changed a lot. And I mean, I know for me, like I say, I'm growl about the iPhone, but I also like the fact that I can hit people up on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or pick your messenger of choice, in addition to emails and texts and phone calls. Oh, phone calls, what a novel concept. I would guess these days I probably spend less than 10% of my time on the actual phone itself. How's that working for, like, in the field side of things, Geary?
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, and it's not just managing millennials. It's recognizing what their interests are. I mean, quite frankly, if you're dealing with a younger workforce, they're way more concerned about work-life balance than some of us workaholics ever were. Okay, because we came from a time where, hey, the harder you work, the farther you could climb up the ladder. Well, then, the younger guys, the millennials, going, yeah, and then somebody could yank it out from under you. So,
yeah. Or you end up having a heart attack at 50. So
yeah, and they've watched their parents, and you know, it's changed a lot of things. So it's just being sensitive to people and what, you know, like I've said to everybody, I said, everybody's got a favorite radio station. It's the same radio station. It's called WIIFM. What's in it for me?
yeah.
Okay. And so that's what you need to be aware of to work with anybody, millennial or somebody that's, you know, closer to my end of the work scope.
Right.
Meet people where they are and help them achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah. And I'm going to go counter to what I said earlier and say where I said, you know, we're not paying enough, and that's not incorrect. But once you hit a certain point, the money's not the big deal. You got to love what you do.
Yep.
You know, and I think that's more important now than it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of people that in the younger generation would go, I don't care what you're paying. If it's not a healthy work environment, I want nothing to do with it.
Right. And you know, you see a lot of the folks, they'll be like, yeah, you can't get anybody to work, and it's like, oh, you can get them to work if you understand the terms with which they prefer to work.
Yes.
And it is a challenge, no question. It's going to require some shifting of gears, if you will, mentally.
You're going to be a leader, or you're going to be a boss.
Right. And I mean, more and more, you know, as I get older, I'm discovering that I tend to follow that same mindset. I mean, used to be, if I was awake, I was working. Now it's not uncommon for me to shut the laptop off for a couple hours and go do something with my actual family, who turns out are really nice people once you get to know them.
Indeed. But yeah, so that's that's the whole situation there, and people just need to realize what the change is. I guess I would say that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is everybody tends to get in a paradigm and they get kind of tunnel vision, and it's that we've got to adjust.
Yeah. And so I'm going to just throw the open question out to the audience and see if anybody's got any thoughts or ideas on this particular topic. And like I say, I know it's pretty polarized on, you know, some people are like, you can't get people to work. And it's like, well, you can get them to work, but you're probably not going to get them to work 80 hours a week for 40 hours of pay. You know, and that's, you know, definitely something that's changed a lot. And that comes back to, you know, the whole communication style. And this is one, and so I'll give you an example. And this is where, so Ed reaches out to me this morning. Ed's going, oh, don't tell him that. But he's like, do you know if Geary got his email? And I said, look, Geary's very much the person that if an email doesn't specifically require or request a response, he's not going to waste your time or his with it. I'll send him a note and ask. And I send him a note and I get back a thumbs up, and it's like, okay, cool, he got the email, life is good. But you know, as opposed to writing me a book that takes up 5 minutes of both our time. So no,
Yep.
I appreciate it, but again, it's a style. Know the person you're speaking to and how they communicate.
Yep.
One of the examples I use a lot is I do tech stuff. I probably handle as many technical support questions on Facebook Messenger these days as I do via email or telephone. You know, I handle sales calls on LinkedIn. So it's just whatever format. Shane mentions, for better or worse, he's very verbose in emails. And Shane, I'm here to tell you, I got a couple of customers that make you look concise. And I'm going to emphasize and underline concise, because I've got one rep, bless his heart, he will give me the information I need. He will give me all the information I need. And it's if you print it, it's about 4 pages long every email, but I'm getting what I need. So, you know, again, you just learn different people's communication styles. We were talking about different resources, and I just grabbed a couple of quick screenshots of different ones that I use. Virtual Engineer is a list server that was quite literally started by engineers for engineers. There's next to no fluff in it. It's really strictly moderated. There is a topic for like a folder for the fluff and jokes and whatever, but everything else will be on topic all the time. And typically you're talking to folks that know what they're about. Radio lists, Barry Michigan moderates those. They're pretty good. Of course, Barry's BDR. And there are Facebook groups, and I just went with the B's for broadcast. But yeah, I mean, you know, radio technical forums, transmitter talk, transmitter sites, et cetera, and so on. You find a Facebook group for anything. The challenge becomes that they tend to be a lot more open. So like I said before, you'll get 85 answers and 5 of them may have value to you. So be prepared to filter a little bit. You're nodding your head. And I see you on some of those same groups here and there.
Well, I do get involved from time to time, Jeff. And one of the things that I try to do is a lot of times I'll go in and just kind of be the guy that does a little agitating, going, are you being limited by your paradigms? Because I'll get people that'll talk on a lot of that stuff, and they'll be seeing something and not seeing the big picture. And I'm not saying that I've always got the answer, but things aren't always going to be as tunnel vision as people would like them to be. Right. And one funny thing about engineers, Jeff, when we're communicating with other people, a lot of times we'll get more detail than what they're looking for.
Yep.
I'll spend a lot of times when I'm working with folks in the field, and I'll say, you know, I can work in 2 different modes. One is I can tell you what time it is, and the other one is I can tell you how the watch works. Which would you prefer?
Yeah. And I've got a guy who will frequently tell me when I'm answering a question, he'll interrupt and say, he goes, I don't need to know how to design the car. I just need to know how to get to Tim Hortons. And,
there you go.
You know, so that's the, yeah, exactly. The mindset. And sometimes you got to make the conscious decision to slow your roll and speak to, I guess it's fair to say, speak to the level of the person you're talking to. You know, typically, if I've got somebody in a clerical problem or position with a question on a spreadsheet, I'm not going to go into the same level of detail as I would about why the server's blocking this particular IP address that she's trying to link the information from.
Right, and it's one of these. It's a situation again. It goes back to our paradigm. We like things. You know, some of the people we're talking to don't necessarily like things. They just want their problem solved.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't need to know how to build the car. I just want to get to Tim Hortons.
Amen.
So that is something. So Shane, going to unmute you again, buddy. But if I'm not mistaken, that is the exact quote that you were referring to, or the article you were referring to. Is that right?
You are absolutely right, and that quote is still absolutely right.
Yeah. And see, the funny thing, and this is one of the things that we beat the drum on a lot, or I beat the drum on a lot. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at a tube, a transistor, a computer, a server blade, audio server, whatever, volts, ohms, amps. It all breaks down to the same, and I say break it into bite-sized pieces.
Yep.
So, you know, I mean, that is one of the things that we run into a whole lot more because people get intimidated by this stuff. So
back in the old days, Jeff, we had high voltage and low current stuff, and today we've got things that might be sitting at 48 volts, but my God, the current that they pull. Well, that's still a lot of stuff that can mess you up.
I'm here to tell you that firsthand knowledge, a 70 volt, 2000 amp power supply with a loose connection makes an incredibly efficient arc welder.
Amen.
You know, I can vaporize copper like nobody's business. Yep. Now, you know, a 70 kilovolt supply at half an amp will make a very, very big spark.
Yes.
So, yeah, different strokes depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Amen.
So, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I tell folks, and one of the things I miss the most, and I tend to try and do it on any piece of gear that I've got to work on, is draw a little block diagram. What are the pieces? You know, and I mean, I don't need to know the schematics at this point. I just need to know what are the different blocks, because I say break it into bite-sized pieces, something manageable, something a little less intimidating. whether you're mapping a network or looking at a transmitter.
Yep. You know, Jeff, one of the things I was just briefly here, and one of the things that I talked about here just a couple of minutes ago, but it's really kind of important when we're mentoring young people that are looking to go into the technical side of things. The troubleshooting skills that they need are as much people skills as they are technical skills. And that's something that we're trying to also focus on when we bring people into the industry, because they're going to deal with non-technical people, and they need to be able to interact with them and not get frustrated when those people don't think at the same level that we do.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, that, again, communication style. It's something that, a sec here. I can't type and talk at the same time. Again, I've been on the road so much this year, the number of brain cells that are available rapidly dwindling. But one of the things that historically, the engineer was the guy that came in the suit and tie. He was part of the management team, and they involved in all the discussions. Then we evolved to the point where he was the guy sitting in the back corner in jeans and a flannel shirt, just fixing stuff. And if you brought it in, he'd just kind of grunt and say, put it on the shelf and I'll get to it. And, you know, and I think we're slowly, not necessarily the suit and tie, but evolving back to the more, I guess, social, more part of the management team. And some of it's by requirement. I mean, the guy that is responsible for the bulk of where the money goes pretty much needs to be part of the team, so he knows A, how much money there is, and B, how the priorities are set. Then
yeah,
you were mentioning earlier about a mutual associate, Tom, and from the Tom teaches at the Walker Management Institute, again with the WBA, and he came in and did a really good session on just, it was a lot of accounting, like broadcast accounting, which is stuff I never knew. But having a rough idea of the difference between a balance sheet and an expense report, and of course I'm trying to come up with it off the top of my head, so I'm going to screw it up royally without my notes in front of me. But it was really useful information, because typically, you know, as engineering, we just look and we say, oh, this is broke, I need a new one. You know, and you're not thinking about where does it fit in the priority list, must, need, want, or do I want it because it's shiny, or do I want it because we need it to continue to build our product?
And you know, as the engineer, you know how important it is, but you need to be able to communicate that to people. If you just go at people and you talk with them and say, well, what's the matter with it? Why don't you understand this? You know, once again, I'll go back to what's everybody's favorite radio station. If you can put it into terms of what's in it for them, and how this makes their life better, and how this keeps things working and everybody happy, and you know, can I make a business case for it? If we could do that, then guess what?
Yep. And that comes back to one of the other advanced questions, and I haven't looked to see if he is in the attendee list at the moment, but one of the other advanced questions was, how do I make the case for an assistant engineer? And I don't see William in there, so we'll have to get it, and he'll catch it on the recording. But that'd be a good question for you. If you've got a market where you think you need another engineer to help the primary guy out, how do you make that case?
That's a really good question, and what you need to do is sit down with your market manager. At least this is what you would do in the alpha world, and just walk through it and look at what the tasks are, look at what the time is spent, and figure out what you need to do. And quite frankly, if you're on the older end of the age scale, you can also talk about the fact that we need to bring somebody along because I'm not going to be around forever.
Right.
And that's really how we got where we are now. I mean, I talked about the fact where you had 8 guys for an AM and FM, and now you got 1 guy for 8. Well, we just kept pushing that off and pushing that off. And then people retire, and then they go, oh my God, what are we going to do? We
got nobody for all these markets. Yeah.
So
I mean, that comes back to
go ahead.
you're going to say you and I were at the RF 101 that SBE did before NAB, and Alpha sent several folks out to that course.
Absolutely. And those were folks that were looking to develop more into our next generation. You know, we, once again, I keep telling people we got to pay it forward. And talking with our CFO now, he's starting to get it. Okay. But we're talking his language.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this comes back to something that I've told people for years, is that if you're charged with maintaining a station, whether you're a contract engineer or an employed engineer, whether it's a public station or a private, commercial or non-com, you need to have a really good idea of what that station bills or underwrites by the minute, by the hour, by the day. Because if you don't know what the off-air time is worth, it's hard to make any kind of justification on the ROI for anything.
Yep. And part of that same conversation is, if you've been around the industry as long as, like myself has, when I got involved, the amount of revenue that was dropping to the bottom line is nothing like today. I mean, it's a much tighter situation. So if you don't change that paradigm and realize that, you know, we have to go in and make a financial case for most anything, then, you know, shame on us.
Right. And that's, again, a learning curve as we evolve back from the guy in the closet fixing stuff to the part of the management team that we really need to be going forward. Connor mentioned in the comments that Bates Technical College, who I'd referred to earlier as having one of the few engineering courses left, is looking for a new instructor for the broadcasting program after one of the two remaining instructors retired. It's in Tacoma, Washington, not Oregon. That's on me. Program is still going, seems to be in the hands of who takes it on next to see if it'll last. So anybody who, what do they say, those who can do, those who can't teach. Well, I do a lot of teaching, but I like to think that mostly I can do if I need to. So if you got an interest, hey, college instructor's not a bad gig.
No.
Now, mind you, both my parents are teachers. One of my sisters is a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. So I may or may not have a family history here, slightly biased. Now, Connor does mention that in that course, out of 25 people in that class, about 5 of them ended up in the industry. So, you know, right off the bat, that's a pretty good success rate for relatively speaking. John mentions that it's a tough commute from Alaska, but John, you know, you could always move away from the land of ice and snow to the rain of cold, or to the land of rain and cold and damp. And yeah, anyway, we won't get into regional weather patterns. I will give a little shout out. We're pushing 5 minutes to the top of the hour. We'll probably run a couple of minutes long. If anybody has an absolute hard cutoff, we do record this stuff, so you can certainly go find the last few minutes in the archive. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew. I don't think we'll run half an hour late, but a couple of minutes. So here is one thing, and this that comment about Bates Technical really ties in well with this, because so for anybody in the U.S. who doesn't know, on the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 29 is basically the book dealing with occupational health and safety. This is the OSHA rule book. And in short, what it says, if you're not trained to do something and you do it, that's bad. Now, that's it in a very, very small nutshell. The challenge is this also sets liability for the station. So if somebody who's not trained to work on something happens to get fried in the process, that lawsuit is over before it even gets placed.
Yep,
so,
it's a bad day.
Yep. And as engineers, that's another thing, because so Tom would tell you when we were talking that course, he said, engineers have 3 priorities. Number 1 priority, protect the license, no matter what. Number 2, stay on the air. And then number 3, he said, well, that's everything else. The rest is all routine. But so in the protect the license category, that's where this would fit in. Let's see. John's asking if the NAB or SBE maintains a list of existing broadcast engineering training programs. John, I gave it to you. Bates Technical is pretty much it at the moment.
Yes, it's really shrunk down.
Yeah, if anybody is aware of a formal one, certainly let me know, but it's the only one that I know of. And I've spent, well, as you can tell by the 2012 date on the presentation cover slide I showed earlier, I've spent a lot of years paying attention to this because it's, yeah, I mean, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel in this case has been a train. Now, let's see. So, maybe we won't run too late over time. Geary, I am going to, and here, the center one, the center bullet point here, hold an open house. This one comes next to your, okay, Steve mentions that Cleveland Institute still has a broadcast engineering course too, which is, I'd forgotten all about that. So that's another good one. The open house, Traverse City, WTCM, Traverse City Communications, they had, and this is how they found Jimmy, their assistant, shoot, I'm brain farting, but their assistant engineer. Mm-hmm. And what they did, they held an open house. They had a bunch of students come in, and they attracted students the same way we attract engineers to an SBE meeting. Hey, we're buying pizza, and you know, free food will bring students in. So they went to the local tech schools. I think they had one vocational type school with electronics, and mostly high schools with STEM programs. Mm-hmm. And they had, I don't know, 20, 30 kids come in, fed them all pizza, gave them sodas, showed them around the studio, let them go into a production room and record a little voiceover spot, you know, slap it on a USB stick so they got something to, hey, I was talking on a radio station. Yep. And for the ones who were looking at the other end of the mic cable and looking to see what it connected to, the engineers kind of cornered them and said, hey, why don't you come out and take a look and set up an STL shot or whatever? You know, there's a bunch of things you could do, and right. Show them the technical end of things. And at the end of it, they said, you know, we're looking for an apprentice to come out and kind of learn the engineering ropes. If you're interested in, you know, even part-time, then, you know, fill out an application. And they got several applications that way, and ended up hiring this guy, and he's been there ever since, as far as I know. And that was 5 years ago, at least.
Yep. Well, so, and Jeff, you know, a lot of times, we here in Michigan, we've got a lot of broadcast programs at high schools and colleges, okay? But yeah. The majority of those folks are on the programming side, like you're talking about. Right. And so I've said to people, I said, you know, talk to the instructors. Is there anybody that's involved in their program that is more interested in being behind the scenes than they are in being on the camera? And if so, let's talk to them.
Well, and I mean, so how many engineers do you know that tell a story that starts with, so I was on the air one day, and after I finished my shift, the production director came to me and said, you know, this may not be for you, but I've seen you fixing stuff, and you should go talk to this guy.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's amazing how many of us start on that end of the mic.
And we need to start younger, okay?
Yeah.
If we're waiting to talk to people when they're in college, I'm sorry, but the Alphabets and the Ciscos of the world are going to be after them.
Yep. Well, and I've made that argument for years. This is an industry where if you get into it and the bug bites you, you're likely going to stay in, because it is still pretty cool once you're involved.
It's like a virus.
Yep. Or a wart. I mean, it's one of those things, though. I mean, when you get into it, it's like, it's still a whole lot of fun, you know? And I mean, it can be a whole lot of fun. Now, there are days when it's certainly not a whole lot of fun, you know, and even at the manufacturing end, there'll be days when I come home and my wife looks at me and says, you need to go down to your workshop and beat on something for a little while. And
get out of here.
Yeah. And you know, but or she knows it's a really bad day if I walk in the house, grab a beer, and walk out and jump on the lawnmower and mow the lawn that I mowed yesterday. But because at that point I just want noise and mechanical stuff. Anyway, yeah, I mean, for the most part, it is a lot of fun with a lot of cool people in it. So there are things that we can do, but we need to. I think we need to I guess, attack it as more of a coordinated effort. And that's why I mean, I know, that I drug it into the SBE, and hopefully, well, I've seen some changes that indicate some things are being done. And folks, you should see some of that coming out in the next little while. The state organizations, John had mentioned earlier that I need to get on the Alaska broadcasters, and I've been talking to them about some things too. So absolutely, I don't mind coordinating it within the limits of the fact that I have a day job and a wife, and both of them expect a certain amount of time from me. But yeah, I'm happy to help out with stuff like that.
Yep.
And Geary, I know, well, just by virtue of the fact that you're here, you don't mind helping out with stuff like that here and there.
That's exactly right. And, we can do a lot, and we can work together, and everybody's got a good idea. And a lot of times, just like broadcasting has been the free exchange of borrowed ideas, we can do the same thing on the technical side.
Yep. So I'm going to throw it out there right now, and we're much closer to the top of the hour than I thought we'd be, but there you go. If anybody has an answer to any one of those 5 questions, and I know it's 3 bullet points, but hey, like we said before, I've never been able not to write the whole story. But any comments at all, jwelton@nautel.com, Nautel, B-N-A-U-T-E-L. Shoot me an email with those thoughts. And even if you don't want to be involved in it, just let me know. And I'm more than happy to champion the idea and see what we can do going forward. Because I think we need a few more engineers, a few good men or women, as the case may be. Other cool thing, that's something that I'm seeing is per capita, I think I'm starting to see more ladies coming in, and that's also cool because you need somebody with a lot more patience than I've got some days. That may not be politically correct, but yeah, I've been known to flip off the short end of the stick a little too many times. Maybe I'm just getting old and cranky. Anyway, all right. On that note, folks, it is 2:02. Resources. This webinar, as I said, will be recorded. So absolutely, you can find it on the resources tab on our website, Waves newsletter, full of all kinds of helpful tips and tricks. Thank you, me. YouTube channel, great stuff there. Plus our support folks, their little how-to webinars end up on the YouTube channel too, and they're great resources. And then various online info. I mentioned Barrie, Michigan's BDR.net, the radio list pages, Facebook chapter for absolutely everything. Got a request in here to please explain DAB. So digital audio broadcasting is a long and detailed discussion that I'll tell you what, we'll make it the subject of an upcoming TNT TTT. It is explosive, so there is that. But Asanga, if you go back to the webinars listed on the top slide there, I have done several HD radio and DRM related ones. At Nautel, we don't build an L-band DAB product, so I don't have any webinars on that topic. But certainly for HD radio and DRM plus, I do. So you can certainly go in there and find that, again, looking for the resources. They're out there. It's just a challenge to find them some days. On that note, Gary Morrill from Alpha Media and SBE Education Committee, I want to thank you very, very much for your time today. Greatly appreciated.
And thanks for the invite.
And another shout out to Mr. Disembodied Voice, Edward Sylvester, for keeping the train on the track. Again, there he is. And absolutely, thanks to the folks attending. Really appreciate it when y'all spend an hour with us. Again, fill out your survey forms that you'll get after. Make absolutely sure if you get any suggestions for future topics, throw them up there. The more input I get from you guys, the less thinking I have to do on my own. And as I get older, that's probably a good thing. So again, thank you all very much. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I forget what the topic is. Ed, do you remember?
I don't have it in front of me at the moment, unfortunately. Could be DAB.
Might be. I know we're into July. We've discovered that going every 2 weeks seems to be a good break. So, yep. Anyway, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, folks. Thanks very much. Have a great day. Bye now.